Actually, Michael Jordan showed up, guest appearance. Yeah, it was unreal. Still remember it till today. I guess shock and trauma, but also humility to get support from others when you're weak and vulnerable. But that was fun. Like the transition, however, in that period got me to start thinking beyond just doing a contract.
And what strikes me as well is that, I don't know if this is something that you had within you as well when you were younger or a teenager, but obviously your parents took a risk coming to the UK as well and moving to Ham, in that sense, a very different environment. So was that something that you found quite natural early on in life in terms of that ability to take risks?
That was my motto. How can I help? How can I serve? How can I give value to people? I'm looking for work, but I can't get work. But instead of complaining...
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Leonard Fom has joined me in the studio today. Leonard, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me along. I'm really glad that I'm here.
Yeah, it was good to see you. And we always start by asking our guests just to introduce themselves. So tell us a bit about yourself and where your current focus is right now.
No, fantastic. I appreciate that. So I'm a proud father of 5 and a really blessed man with a wonderful wife. Been married for 21 years. Can't believe it. And I've survived it. No, in a good way. And yeah, I feel really... I guess a really interesting part of my career. Like I've just made a big transition, but really looking forward to the next couple of years, 10, 20 years ahead of me. I've been in finance for the large part of my career to date, finance and consultancy. I'll go into a little bit more detail later on, but I'm looking to make a big difference in that space.
Excellent. And tell us a bit about what you do with your family. So when you're not working, what kind of things you enjoy doing?
Yeah, so do loads. With 5 children, you can imagine they're all pulled in different directions. Enjoy food, enjoy travel, enjoy meeting other families. We've got a larger family around us, events, and I guess just sharing moments. Like we really have been big on sharing moments throughout those years, and it's really nice seeing my children grow up into adulthood. That's been really nice to see them going from childhood to adulthood. And we've got a mix between the ages as well, which makes it quite nice as well. I've got one of my children out in the US, which makes it kind of different now and sad, but also fun. But yeah, it's been fantastic. It's really, really nice being a father to my children. You know, some of them play basketball, some play other sports, and others just enjoy work. So it's a real mixed bag. I think our simple thread is food. We all love our food and we all love traveling, meeting different cultures and experiencing music and life, I think, experiencing life other than ourselves, which is quite nice.
What I'm looking forward to during our conversation is, with 5 children, how you manage to have that balance between obviously being successful in your profession, but also making sure you're there for your family. So I'm sure that will come up and our listeners will be looking forward to that, particularly those from big families. So let's go back to your family experience when you were younger. And what I'm really fascinated by is how our leadership style, particularly moving to our 20s, is shaped by our childhood experiences, be they really good ones or sometimes more challenging ones. So tell us a bit about your earlier years.
Yeah, no, my earlier years were amazing. My parents are from Nigeria, so they came over to the UK when I was really young. I believe I was 1 or 2 when they arrived. And I have 3 brothers. I've got 1 older, me, and then 2 younger. And we grew up relatively, you could say, not well off, on a council estate. And then my parents moved into a maisonette. But when you talk about leadership, I think my dad was probably, and my mum, both of them were very entrepreneurial, hardworking, but very creative in terms of, to keep the lights on and making ends meet. So my dad worked multiple roles, did multiple jobs, as well as my mum. And they seem to have sort of juggled that around, sort of raising four boys in South London, which for me was a real inspiration. What that did mean, though, was that sometimes we didn't see our parents much. And it meant that I actually leveraged looking up to our older brother a lot, who himself was he is a fantastic leader. He seems to galvanize and bring people around him. And so as we grew up in Elsfield in Wandsworth and then moved actually to Ham, which was really interesting because at the time there were not many black families. And we moved in the 90s, so it was still kind of new to us. It was a big shell shock actually for us all. But it was amazing how my brother was a real leader on the street. So we used to play football, we used to play basketball, all sorts of sports on the field. I mean, on our road. It was like a cul-de-sac. But the way he managed to sort of bring everyone together, all the boys together, he was like a magnet. And so I looked to him. He was also a leader figure. Alongside that, I guess it was a real time of transformation in sports. I think in the 90s, especially at basketball, it was 1992. I remember the Dream Team took place in Barcelona Olympics, and I fell in love with basketball. So I was looking up to sort of Michael Jordans, the Magic Johnsons, and that actually was one of the catalysts that got me into sports. And I felt sports was a great anchor to help me on my leadership journey in terms of that discipline, the ethos of sort of not giving up, consistency, practice, continually sort of getting better as well and improving on your skill set. So definitely lent on sports stars, didn't know it then, but if I look back, definitely they inspired me. And then also hip hop. So hip hop was huge. And I remember the Biggie Smalls, the Tupacs, the Jay-Z. I used to love Jay-Z. So Jay-Z was a hip hop artist that really sort of got to me. I used to love how he was quite entrepreneurial with the way he rapped. And he always used to talk about business and, getting success despite having a hard background. So that actually shaped me as well a lot in terms of my upcoming and upbringing. So it was a mixture of sports, music, brothers, and parents.
And what strikes me as well is that, I don't know if this is something that you had within you as well when you were younger or a teenager, but obviously your parents took a risk coming to the UK as well and moving to Ham, in that sense, a very different environment. So was that something you found quite natural early on in life in terms of that ability to take risks?
I think so, yeah. And I think you're right. I think that, subconsciously, as well as consciously seeing my parents doing stuff, allowed me to think that's the norm.
Yeah.
The norm was always to be agile, take risks. Like my parents set up multiple businesses. So I remember my dad had a minicab company and, my mom used to sort of sew dresses, Nigerian outfits and things like that. So I always saw them being very agile and creative to sort of make money. And that led me to have that curious mind to sort of always excel, succeed, and never sort of see one thing as an option. Think of multiple things as I grow. The hardship it was around sort of never having holidays, and so there was always we're always working. Sometimes we would have like maybe a trip here or there, but we'll never have like holidays abroad. We'll have friends going abroad, traveling to Spain, traveling etc. to US, Disneyland, Florida, etc. We used to always be home, or visiting aunties or uncles that were local. So that was I guess I was kind of intrigued and wanted to sort of do more. And so again, that was also a burning edge that came about. So I think one of the biggest things or triggers in my life was actually whilst in Ham, my parents actually lost the home. And it was a significant rupture in our life because, and I still remember it very clearly because I was the one I was coming home with my younger brother, one immediately underneath me, and I had the keys of the house and was coming back and I couldn't open the door. And I was really confused. I was thinking, how comes I can't get into my home? There was no mobile phones at the time. So it was a bit like, where do we go to? And we were in Ham, and the only place I knew how to sort of get to was my auntie's house, and she was all the way in Balham. So I went with my brother, got onto a bus, and we made our way to Balham. And at that point, we were actually homeless. And it was a massive impact on me because it was the year of my GCSEs. So very disruptive. And it did impact my GCSEs. I remember us as a family having to live, the six of us in one room in Barnes, all of us. And so it was tough. It was a tough time having one uniform, going into school, smelling of foods. It impacted me, but at that time in a negative way, but also in a good way. I think I was always thinking, well, hopefully if I have a family, this will never happen to me. That sort of mindset, that whole resilience. And, fast forwarding onto where, well, I can go into a little bit more detail, but we managed to get home. And that was in North Sheen, and it was a council home. So what we had to do, this is me doing my GCSEs, being brothers or boys, my parents got us to actually decorate the home. So we used to come back, strip walls, plaster walls, paint walls. So very handy, but also studying at the same time. So no wonder my grades tanked. And I was expecting sort of quite good grades, but I got C's. However, another thing, part of my life was basketball, and I was playing a lot of basketball, and that got me to get that release. And I got really good at it. Actually, I got so good that actually I went to the US again by myself. I funded my own flight, my own ticket, and got to a camp called the 5-Star Camp. At that 5-Star Camp, actually Michael Jordan showed up, guest appearance. Yeah. It was unreal. Still remember it till today, how it sort of just changed obviously he was amazing, and he is probably the greatest. I don't want to go there yet. It's debatable now. But at the time he was, and it was an amazing experience seeing his mindset, his ability, his skill set. And that just gave me this a fresh drive to not only play basketball, but just to succeed in life. And so that was a huge trigger point to sort of my leadership journey.
I love your story, and this is coming of this lovely hot pot of, experiences. So we've got on the one hand you being shaped particularly by your elder brother and the entrepreneurial and risk-taking nature of your parents, although not seeing a lot of them and being in it all together in that sense in terms of the brothers. And then you've got the homelessness, which is a traumatic event, which obviously affected you at the time, and yet this thread of passion for a team sport, something you're very good at, and the opportunity to travel to the US. So let's move into your 20s. And what I'm really interested in is you've got the DNA here and the background where you're going to be successful, as a leader, and yet there are some downsides of that because the drive that we have and sacrifices we make and just to be successful. So just talk us through that decade, and that would be really interesting to hear.
No, and that was a great segue because I was like around 17, 18 at that time. And so going into my 20s, funny enough, one of the things that I struggled with being the sort of middle child was never really feeling a sense of love as well, ironically. And I've had to sort of dig deep and think about that, but I realized I had some withdrawals. And what that led to actually was me going to university in Derby. So I went to Derby University, 18, and I actually met my wife at university. So met her, fell in love in my second year. We're talking about sort of getting married, etc. Third year, third year, I did a placement year at the NHS. My partner, now wife, fell pregnant. And so in my fourth year, I was actually completing my degree, married my wife and had a child. So I had my first child during my fourth year at university. It was a crazy time in my 20s because that wasn't an easy journey, and I haven't shared this actually, so I'm happy to share it as well. But the fact that I had to work, raise a family, be there for my wife, my children, find a home. We couldn't be in halls. We had to rent. Made me grow up very quickly. And if I'm honest, like true leadership comes when you have to, I think, be a man and be a husband and have real responsibilities. You can't shift it to anyone else. And that journey has been amazing. It's been difficult. It was really difficult because we didn't get support from her parents or my parents, actually. They rejected us. They actually thought we were crazy. They thought we couldn't make it. And, we had a lot of pressure, actually, in terms of seeking abortion for our daughter. But we held our ground, 20 and young. And we then moved from Derby. We came into London thinking we could get more support, but that didn't come. My wife actually then fell pregnant again while we actually chose to have a second just to help with the dynamics. So our daughter at the time wasn't alone. So second child. At that point, I was working. So I started my career in publishing initially as an assistant finance manager. And I was doing CIMA, so Chartered Institute of Management Accounting, and going through sort of the exam process. But I was very ambitious, extremely ambitious. I was like, well, I grew out of my role quite quickly. I then moved to Homebase and did well there. Homebase actually relocated. So I was actually meant to stay there for longer, but they relocated to Milton Keynes, and I chose the decision to take voluntary redundancy. So moved to a consultancy firm. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, but I want to get into banking because at the time, it was around 2006, 2007, banking was booming. I was aware of the bonuses and sort of the big lifestyles. So I was thinking, look, I need to get into banking. And I remember sort of calling up a recruitment consultant saying, and I remember the conversation, I was like, can I get into banking? And the recruitment consultant said to me, you will never get into banking because your grades are not good enough and you would not fit the mold. And in my mind, I thought, well, you watch me. You watch me. And so I went to this consultancy firm and started out as like a finance assistant manager, and then grew in that role and did lots of work around Sarbanes-Oxley, did monthly management reports. I actually traveled the country, sort of present at senior management leadership teams. I was really showing that leadership drive. So much so that actually the finance director brought me into his room and said, Leonard, like, I don't think you could stay here long enough. Like, your drive is really, really, really a lot. I actually would suggest and back you to actually even find somewhere else. And I did. And so I applied to Lloyd's Banking Group, and I got the role in banking. And so I must have proved that person wrong, and super excited about actually now that I'm in banking, I can sort of drive forward. So in that space of time, sort of mid-20s, again, super passionate, thinking I can get to the top very quickly in banking. But I realized in a bigger organization, you're actually a small cog in a bigger system. And so I struggled initially because I actually felt I could do everything, but I had to realize that you're stepping on people's toes, or, this is your role and you stick to it. And so I used to do cost management and look after resources within group IT. But one thing I realized actually, and I sort of, again, I'm very observant and quite curious as an individual. And I also like reading. So I was coming to the end of my SEMA exams, but I kept on hearing about this term finance business partnering. And I was like, but we're not doing this at Lloyd's. We're just behind our desk around Excel. And so I actually took the courage to one day sort of knock on the door of the head of the department for the data center at Lloyd's. And lovely guy, he asked me to come in, and we sat down, and he used to play golf. And then I asked him sort of, the reports that we send to you, do you actually use them? And he said no. He said no.
That's brilliant.
And I said like, like, what would you need and how could I help? And he said, well, I've got a dashboard that I'm measured against, and these are sort of the KPIs that we use. And so I thought, cool, let me look to create dashboard reports for him. And so I piloted this whole dashboard reports with finance, non-financial data, service outages, headcount. Like, it was really, really quite creative, like a dashboard. I had 4 boxes and then supporting data. And he loved it. And then his peers, heads of functions, started to say, I want some of that. So what happened, it turned into a rippling effect, and it went to all these other functions, and I got kudos obviously for it. And I remember the actual group IT finance director coming to my desk saying that, fantastic, I love how you've sort of recreated the financial reports to encompass this dashboard reporting for my team. And then I was able to sort of attend their meetings and sit in meetings and really start business partnering. So that was sort of my claim to fame at Lloyd's. What happened, however, I wasn't actually getting promoted. I wasn't seeing it reflected in my salary or bonuses. And I saw other people getting paid more. So what happened to me was I got a little bit disgruntled and decided to leave. I actually had an injury at that time. I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing basketball. And while I was out, I was thinking, what next? I don't want to be here. And that was around coming up to my 30s. So yes, that part of my journey.
Super, and I'm really enjoying these different phases. We all have different phases, don't we, in terms of the journey, and working really hard, getting really good at something and being known for that, and yet sometimes not getting the rewards as well, and therefore we leave. So take us on the journey now in terms of you becoming a bit more mature and what it is you're learning about your leadership style, and also this thing about balancing the larger family and you having to work in that sense. Just talk us through that phase.
Yeah, and to be fair, it was hard. That work-life balance, the city at the time didn't allow individuals to work from home. So I missed my children lots in terms of I would leave early and then come back very late. So sometimes not seeing them for, I would say, almost 2 to 3 days sometimes. And also my wife, and I remember my wife getting quite frustrated sometimes, saying, why are you working so hard? And it was hard. At that time we had 3 children, no support again. And for me, actually, I didn't quite understand it. Like, I'll be like, why are you complaining? I'm working hard. Don't you see? Not knowing that actually raising children is actually probably harder. So I was learning along the journey. And again, we were quite young. So we were learning from one another, me and my wife. Some days weren't easy. But you mature. And at that time, I actually moved into contracting. So I started to freelance. I moved into this freelance gig economy. Didn't know that's what it was called, but that's what I was doing. And I loved it because I loved the variety of work. So I went into Barclays and then on to RBS at the time and then HSBC. And I had a good run of contracting from 2008 to 2019. So for 11 years, never missed a beat, just constantly getting roles. Actually, I tell a lie. 2017, I did have a gap. And this was probably one of the hardest times in my life because in 2017, after leaving HSBC from a role, I went into a smaller boutique private equity firm. I lost my role for the first time, so they let me go. I was obviously devastated, but I was okay. I was like, look, let's look for another role. And at the time, my eldest daughter was doing her Duke of Edinburgh, and I took a trip to go and pick her up. So I was in a car going to pick her up and I had a car crash. that actually changed my life. It really did. And I won't go into the details of the crash, but it led me to go into, I had PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And it meant I was out of work for about 11 months. And that was super challenging. And the fear of me losing my home dawned, because in myself, I thought I would never lose my home. I almost made that promise that that would never happen. And it was close. It was really close. And I was fortunate that there were some really good people around me through my network and actually people from LinkedIn and stuff that stepped up and gave us support. There were some people within our local church that also helped us as well. So that was an interesting period of, I guess, shock and trauma, but also humility, to get support from others when you're weak and vulnerable. But that was fun. The transition, however, in that period got me to start thinking beyond just doing a contract. That's when I started to realize, okay, there's more to life than just working in a role, and there's a risk being a freelancer. You need to start thinking of building up multiple incomes. So as I bounced back and I got back my confidence and got a bit more clarity over, myself, and then getting back into work, the drive kicked back in, and I then started to scale. And that was, in my mid 30s. I was at MasterCard, started to sort of rise back up. Had a great time at MasterCard up until the end. Again, I won't go into too much details, but it ended a bit sour at the end of my tenure there. And again, it was quite traumatic, the way things were left, which again was at a time of the global pandemic. So leaving in 2019, looking for work during the winter period of 2020, almost getting a role, and then the pandemic comes. And again, it tested me. It really tested me as a leader. Like what sort of grits, and I use these words, grits. And again, this is the sports in me where, we're not going to lose. Our mentality, we're going to find a way out. And I remember my wife being really concerned because it's like very choppy. And again, a bit frustrated by what happened at the work. And so I leaned into coaching others, because I realized everyone was sort of, not everyone, but a lot of people were in disarray because of the pandemic. They couldn't work. And I thought, how can I help people? That was my motto. How can I help? How can I serve? How can I give value to people? I'm looking for work, but I can't get work. But instead of complaining, enjoyed the family, really enjoyed the family. It was a wonderful time. But also, how can I add value to others? So I was coaching others and then going for a coaching course myself, which actually helped me because I was struggling with bitterness and things like that. But leaning into being fully present, leaning into understanding my inner voice, leaning into just, being me. And that was fantastic. Like, I think I grew so much in that year. Actually, I think that's where I am today. I feel almost invincible because I was able to do a lot of work. There's individuals who have now gone on to Dragon's Den and secured money. And there's anyway, individual, and they've done well. And that's because I've coached them. And I then managed to get back into work and worked at Ernst & Young in the CFO advisory firm. I also did some work in the local school of my children because of Black Lives Matter. So I helped bring peace and harmony into a situation. So again, taking the leadership leaf out of my bow, I actually realized there were situations around me, but I can lead in them and serve people through my leadership. And I think that's where I am today. I've literally grown from there. As I built up, work at EY, I started to realize actually there's a potential gap in the market where I can serve smaller businesses, but with my finance background and knowledge, how can I serve them as a fractional CFO. And instead of having one role, have multiple roles. And behind that, build a team behind me. So I'm not going alone while I'm helping businesses. I'm also building a infrastructure, a finance consultancy to help small businesses not only scale, but fuel them, stabilize them, give them insights through dashboard reports and things like that, and go on the journey with them. And this is where this comes. And so again, I took some time with doing it. I realized that a lot of people are fractionals, but I had to rebrand myself. I had to think a bit deep within, and I love doing deep work because I started to realize there's a thread of orange. I love orange. I've always had orange. 5-star was orange, and you can see orange caps, the orange and black. And so, I created this brand, Finops Squad, FOS. That's what it stands for, is what I'm doing now.
Excellent. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think the best way, got a website, so www.finops, so FINOPS -squad.com. So that's my website, or my LinkedIn. So yes, I will be sharing and I'm posting about my journey on LinkedIn.
Super. Now, before I let you go, I have one question to ask you, and it's going to be important, I think, in terms of the listeners, who have really resonated with your story. What I'm hearing is this, even from childhood, with the family you grew up in, this ability to have this grit, this determination to be successful, and yet you've had some downs as well, and you've highlighted those. So thank you for doing that. Just talk to us a little bit about what advice you'd give to people out there that have experienced similar events, maybe unexpected sometimes, where they have been resilient, and yet there comes a point in their life where actually they have to ask for help. And I tend to find that people find it really hard to ask for help when they've been supporting others all the way through their lives. So just give some advice to those people out there, because you've been there.
Yeah, I would say it's good to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a superpower. Like, our stories also count. So your story counts. We all have stories because it helps others along the journey. So definitely look to be vulnerable, seek for help, ask for help, and look to, step out. I have a phrase that I've always used during my journey, is be comfortable. People say be comfortable being uncomfortable, but be comfortable staying in the pocket. And what I mean by that is, like, boxing, I like boxing, but the hardest position to be is when you're close in and taking blows. And you need to be strong in those times and fearless. So be comfortable staying in the pocket, and then taking the courage to sort of step out. You will be highly rewarded for it. And I've been enjoying my journey as a result of it. And I took the bold step to leave my contract to go in full time for what I'm doing. But I can't look backwards. I'm really, really looking forward to not only enjoying the time, the space, but the family time that I can now have. Has been amazing. Yes, financially it's a bit different for now, and I say for now, but it's really rewarding.
I did the same thing as you in 2017, and you're absolutely right, it is, and there are those bumps in the road, but as you say, if you trust that what you're doing is what you're meant to be doing at this stage in your life, and you gain so much satisfaction and reward from being in service of those people you've talked about, then it's absolutely worth it. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, Leonard. We've had a really lovely listen to your story, and thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for definitely inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.